Hello, my name is Kristen Bolden and I'd like to welcome you to The Other Side of History. Now in this musical we are going to talk about one of the greatest musical families that our world has ever known, the Bach family. Bach, the name Bach, it came from a long line of professional musicians, with over 300 Bachs working as musicians. In Johann Sebastian Bach's time, the word Bach was even a term that was used to mean a musician. Now, I am going to feature Johann Sebastian Bach, who lived from 1685 to 1750, and also his three sons. Johann Sebastian Bach was himself taught by his elder brother, who was Johann Christoph Bach. Now, Johann Christoph Bach, he taught his younger brother, which was Johann Sebastian Bach, lessons on the harpsichord, the clavichord, and organ. Johann Sebastian Bach was only 15 years old when he became a professional musician. He had also been a boy soprano, and this is how he became familiar with the finest of choral music. Now, for more on Johann Sebastian Bach, I would encourage you to listen to my musical, and it is titled The Life of Bach. When Bach's voice broke while a choir boy at St. Michael's, he was kept as an instrumental musician, an instrumentalist, because of his skill. Now, Bach explored various musical centers, and one of them was Celle, which was 60 miles south of Lunenburg. Now, here Bach first came into contact with French music. The elegance of the French music, it appealed to Bach. And throughout his life, he turned to the French ornamental melodies and rhythms that he had first experienced there at Celle. Bach had his challenges. There are people in this world who do not like music and think that it's of no importance. Now, Johann Sebastian Bach, he worked for a time for Prince Leopold, but then the prince, he married a princess, and her name was Frederica Henrietta, who was not impressed with Bach or music in general. It seemed that she was also jealous of the close relationship that was between her husband and Bach. This ended Bach's work with the prince. Bach also worked for a church that had a Puritan group within it. Now, these people were against making music important in the church service and made Bach's life very difficult. Now, when Bach began to experiment in his choral arrangements, the congregation became even more upset and objected to the surprising variations and also all the ornaments that made their chorals. And it made them harder to sing. Now, Bach was also taken to task for his poor relations with his choristers. Bach was working at Weimar when he heard of an opening for conductor, which was 100 miles away. He got the post, but because he had not asked permission from his then employer, which was the Duke of Weimar, he was thrown into the Duke's prison for a whole month as punishment. Johann Sebastian Bach was a master of the fugue. Now, a fugue does not follow one set pattern, The voices, they enter one by one, and once they are all in, the music starts moving from key to key, and the subject piles in on top of itself. New subjects are then brought in, and the subject is turned upside down or varied rhythmically. There's always a sense of direction in the music, and the whole form, it is tightly knit. It's a tightly knit one. So at this time, I would like to play for you a beautiful fugue by Johann Sebastian Bach, who was the master of the fugue. Bach composed over 1,128 pieces of music during his 65 years. There are also an additional 23 works which were lost. Bach owned a wide variety of musical instruments, including keyboard instruments and stringed instruments. Bach's oldest son was Wilhelm Friedmann Bach, and as soon as he was old enough, Bach started his son's musical training. He wrote a series of what today would be called teaching pieces. Bach wrote his 2- and 3-part inventions. The inventions move up the scale from C, one of each major and minor key, except for those keys needing more than 4 sharps or flats in their key signature. So at this time, I would like to play for you the 2-part invention number 1 by Johann Sebastian Bach. Wilhelm Friedmann Bach, he lived from 1710 to 1784, and he was the one whose musical upbringing was the most carefully supervised by his father. Now, Wilhelm, he worked as an organist and he taught private lessons. His best known compositions were the 12 Polonaises for the clavichord. Now, his composition is a composition of his father's with the lighter style of the classical period. Now, I have just a couple lines from a Polonaise by Wilhelm that I would like to play for you. Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, he lived from 1714 to 1788, and his lifetime it spanned the end of the Baroque and the beginning of the classical time. Now, he was 4 years younger than Wilhelm and was also taught by his father. His keyboard playing caught the attention of Prince Frederick, who became King of Prussia in 1740. Now, Frederick hired Carl for his private orchestra. Frederick was an accomplished flute player, and when he gave his first solo performance as king, Carl was the one who accompanied him. Carl stayed with Frederick for 28 years, performing and composing. Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, he belonged to the generation that renewed music by developing a new way of organizing musical composition. Now, both Mozart and Haydn were influenced by Carl Philipp Emanuel, and likewise, Karl was influenced by them. And I have a couple lines from a beautiful, very romantic little song composed by Karl Philipp Emanuel Bach, which I would like to share with you at this time. The last son that we will discuss in this musical is Johann Christian Bach, who lived from 1735 to 1782. Now, Johann Christian was almost of a different generation from that of his other two famous brothers. Wilhelm and Karl were the sons of Bach's first wife, which was Maria Barbara Bach. Now, their father remarried in 1721 to Anna Magdalena, who was Johann Christian's mother. Now, Johann Christian was not a pupil of his father, but of his older half-brother, who was Karl Philipp Emanuel. Now, Johann Christian was without a father at the age of 15 years old. Now, when Bach married Anna, she was 20 years old and he was 36. She was a soprano and also came from a musical family. It was for Anna that Bach wrote the charming little pieces in the Anna Magdalena notebook. And at this time, I would like to play for you a march from Anna Magdalena's notebook by Johann Sebastian Bach. Johann Christian Bach loved opera, and in order to succeed in the opera world, he felt that he had to Italianize himself. He found an Italian patron and became a Roman Catholic. This change of religion would have been a disappointment to his father, Johann Sebastian Bach. Johann Sebastian Bach was a Lutheran, and where he lived and worked, it had been a stronghold of Luther's Reformation. Luther's fervent religious feeling is echoed in much of the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, Wilhelm Friedmann's first job was as organist at the School of St. Sophia that was in Dresden. However, he was torn between the standards of his Lutheran father and the expectations of the Catholic tastes of the new elector, who was Frederick Augustus II. So Wilhelm, he finally resigned. Johann Christian would have perhaps also made a different decision about changing his faith if his father had been alive and able to influence him. Johann Christian Bach is remembered for his light and elegant compositions. One such composition is Allegro in C major that I would like to play for you now. finish, I would like to play two of my favorite hymns. The first one is To the Name That Brings Salvation, which is by Johann Christoph Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach's oldest brother. And the second hymn is O Sacred Head Now Wounded. And that's by Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, O Sacred Head now is known as the Passion Chorale, and it appears 5 times in the course of the oratorio. Bach was not forgetting the congregation, and he brought them into the unfolding drama by interspersing Lutheran chorales at various points in the Passion. These chorales, they were sung by the choirs, accompanied by a full orchestra, and the congregation, which had sung these chorales hundreds of times on Sunday services and were able to join in. Bach used O Sacred Head in a way of achieving emotional as well as musical continuity. As the Passion unfolds, it builds up a deeply stirring musical effect. So at this time, I would like to play for you To the Name That Brings Salvation by Johann Christoph Bach and O Sacred Head Now Wounded by Johann Sebastian Bach. I hope that you have enjoyed this musical. If you have, I would just encourage you to click on that subscribe button. I want to thank each one of you for listening, and God bless.